This is the opposite of transformers. This is the Zen of tedium, or how I learned to stop worrying and love doing things the hard way. So, first off, I got to get it out of the way. There are some really valid reasons to avoid doing things the hard way. And the first of these is some things just take too long. So, when we take our pup to the vet, we like to walk her, weather permitting, and if she's not, in a bad way, it's a nice stroll through the Boston Public Garden and down a tree-lined pedestrian mall, and it takes longer, and we might be a little sweaty and a little dirty when we get there, but doing it the hard way is so much more satisfying than getting a car, popping in, popping out. But if I was going to check in at the home office in Sunnyvale, I would not walk. However pleasant it might be, it would be too long. It would defeat the purpose. So when we have code bases that are millions of lines long or tables that have trillions of rows, a lot of times it's just not worth our while to do things the hard way. That's a valid excuse. Another one is, we're going to push back on this later, but the flip side is sometimes legitimately, I could be using my brain to solve more valuable problems. If my job is to copy and paste cells from one spreadsheet to another spreadsheet in a similar way over and over again, I could legitimately argue that, hey, if I write a tool to automate this, then I can get it up and going, and I could do things that might add a little more value to the team, to the department, to the company. So that's totally fair, totally legitimate thing to do. Another valid reason to avoid doing things the hard way is sometimes we kind of have to. It's part of playing the game. The high point of my Twitter career was this tweet right here, where I said, ML strategy tip: when you have a problem, build two solutions. One is a deep Bayesian transformer running on multi-cloud Kubernetes, and the other is a SQL query built on a stack of egregiously oversimplifying assumptions. You put one on your resume and the other in production, and everybody's happy. So there is sometimes a justification for doing things the fancy way, the automated way, the slick way, for your promotion packet or for your next position that you're trying to get hired for. I don't like it, but it's the truth. Now, got to call out, there are some less than valid reasons to avoid doing things the hard way. The first of these is the fallacy that doing a thing manually is a moral failing. So picture that you have a service or something that you're in charge of making sure it's healthy and running. And so you get a few metrics like how long it takes to return a response, what fraction of the time it's up, what the volume of requests are that it's getting. And you make a little dashboard that you can track these things day to day. And you have a nice visual heartbeat health monitor right there. One approach is you sit down at your desk every morning, you pull these things up, you scroll through them, you take a look, and you get a feeling that, yes, everything is working as it should. Some misguided souls will tell you, hey, we don't do things every day. We're engineers. We write tools for that. We automate that. And sure enough, there are tools that you can go in and set alerts. So if any of those limits are to fall too low or go too high, you can set an alert for that. If any of them change too much in one day, you can set an alert for that too. You can even get fancy, and if like 2 or 3 of them change in some concerted pattern that is worrying for some reason, you can set an alert for that too. And then you turn the thing on and forget about it and walk away. Life is good. You've solved the problem. Now, when you do that, there are 3 things that could happen. One is you get some alerts that something went wrong, and you go and you open it up and you realize, oh, well, yeah, sure, that one was high, but it was a Saturday and it was World Cup. Like, we'd expect that one to be high. Not really a problem. Another thing that can happen is you don't get an alert, but you hear from a very disgruntled VP a few days later what's wrong. And you go and you look and you're like, oh no, I see what happened. I didn't think to set an alert for exactly this set of circumstances, but if I had been looking for it, I would have seen it. The third thing that can happen is your system that does this automated alert check can silently fail. And then you don't know if your service is healthy or not. You've got nothing. You're flying blind. Now, there are engineering solutions to all of these things, like they're not unsolvable, but don't fall for the trap that there's an easy solution to wrap this up. And especially don't fall for the line that it's wrong to pop it open and look at it with your own eyeballs every morning. Another mistaken belief is that manual tasks are beneath me, beneath any of us. So no, I'm not going to do it the hard way. Do you know what my title is? Like, there are other people to do that. We have contractors to do that. We have grad students to do that. Sorry, grad students. We have people who somehow are suited to that and should do that because I shouldn't have to worry about it. I build models. I deploy things in production. I call bullshit. Any job that needs to be done is fair game for any of us. Yes, we specialize. Some things take a long time to get comfortable with. That's fine. But if sweeping the floor is what needs to happen to get the product out the door, then we sweep the floor. If you like to eat, you learn to cook. If you like to build models, you spend time labeling data. You don't assume that someone is going to take care of those dirty details for you. Finally, this one can bring up feelings, busyness. So when you sit down to do a task the hard way, often there's a repetitive nature to it. Our apex executive functions aren't always needed for that. And so we can set those offline while we're paging through the documentation for our software tools, making sure all the functions are well represented and properly typed. Then that allows another part of our brain to kick back and say, oh, you know what? I'm so behind. I owe so many emails and I need to review that paper and I got to get that grant proposal in and I need to write those letters of recommendation. And that's legitimate because most of us are oversubscribed. But the jump that's easy to make there is, therefore, I should not be spending time on this task. I shouldn't be doing it the hard way. There's got to be a better way. It should be automated or it should be delegated or something. Like, it shouldn't happen. I'm going to skip it. I'm going to find a way out. It's oftentimes like, if we've got a task, the best direct path through it is just to take a deep breath and keep going. Do it the hard way, get it out of the way, then move on. Now, the busyness is a big problem. And the solution to that is do less stuff. And if you want to know about that, you'll have to come to the next NormConf, which I'm told will be in 2050. Now, there is a handful of reasons to love doing things the hard way. So this same phenomenon of our apex cognitive functions getting a break is a bonus, because like any muscle, this thing gets tired. We have so many hours in the day, but like brain hours, we have far fewer. Like, if you're really good, you've got 4, maybe 5 peak brain hours. I'm probably down to 2. Like, you only have so much that you can really work with. And so if you're doing something that's a little bit by the book, a little bit repetitive, checking the labels on your data set, you can let that part of your brain rest for an hour, 90 minutes. Then when you're done, you come out, you're ready to scheme and plan and pitch and strategize, and you can jump right back in. Another one is flow. So when you get into a task that is a little bit repetitive and has a little bit of a restricted domain, a beautiful thing can happen where it's like if your brain is a processor and you have your L1 and your L2 cache, you can cache all of the concepts and the relationships and the connections and just have them right there at your fingertips. And so it's almost at that point like you're spinning magic. Like you don't have to go digging and dredging for these things. You're just like constructing it like Elsa with an ice castle. Like you just have it right there. When there's a good flow when I'm coding, it's one of the best feelings in the world. Now, I have strong feelings about large language models. When I'm coding, I feel like there's maybe a dozen paths ahead of me at any given time. And the game is I'm thinking a couple steps forward on each one, like, well, is this a good way to represent this? How might it play with this other part of the system? How might it play with this other part I'm planning to write in the future? And then I'll inch forward, write a line or two, and then I'll repeat that again. And there's this repeated fan, kind of a fractal fan out ahead of me. If I write an informative comment and use that as a prompt to a large language model and it spits out a function for me, that's like it picks one road from beginning to end and says, use this. I'm confident that it's right. This is absolutely the way to do it, GitHub says. Now my thought process is totally hijacked. Instead, I'm evaluating at every tiny step. Well, was this the right name for this variable? Was it the right type to assign to it? Did I want to put this in a function or maybe like abstract it out or maybe just put a couple lines in line in this other function? But you're focused on this proposed path, which can entirely distract you from something else. And you're forced to switch context very quickly. It breaks flow. So this is an instance where, for me at least, doing it the hard way is a beautiful thing. Another benefit is sometimes it is faster. It is better use of time. As always, Randall Munroe, XKCD, has our back on this, little back of the envelope calculation. How often you do a task, how much time you're going to save off if you automate it. And then if you plan to do this task for 5 years, how much time can you invest and break even? Nick HK on Twitter, he said we could use this tweet. He says, I stopped using a reference manager a few years ago and just put together a bib by hand for each new paper. I don't really miss it. Maintaining it was more work than it saved. My personal version of the bib file is I've got a laptop with Linux on it. When I sit down at my desk, I like to plug it into a big monitor so I can see all of my bright red errors much larger. Because Linux is what it is, it doesn't automatically detect the monitor, so I have to unplug it and plug it back in every time my laptop goes to sleep. Linux being what it is, I know that if I were to invest enough time, I could change the right config file or update the right driver, and it would fix the problem, automatically detect it like magic every time. But doing some quick math on how long this takes and how many times I do it, even if I invested an hour in that task, it would take me years to pay it off. So I do it the hard way. I just unplug it and plug it back in. I don't have to think about it. It just happens. Related to this, doing things the hard way ensures focus. The myth on top, again from Randall Munroe, I'm working on a task. Oh, I should automate this. You write some code, automation takes over, boom, free time, you can meme that much more. In reality, you write the code and you get a great 80% solution and you're excited. Like this is legitimate win. This is OKR success. But you're still spending time on the original task. It's not very satisfying in that sense. So you rethink it, you refactor, you go back, you debug, you get it up to a 95% solution. Like that's really good. That is an A level of effort. But you haven't gotten rid of the original task. You still have to monitor it and you still have to go back to it and take care of the other corner cases. So you're lying in your bed at 3 a.m, you're staring at the ceiling and you say, oh, I got it. If I solve this previously unsolved computer science problem, I can get it up to 5 nines of completion, at which point I can walk away. And I had a flash of inspiration for how to do this. And so you jump in with both feet, you work on this problem, you make a little headway, you publish a paper, you get recognized for it, you get a new position at another institution, and the original task is never touched again, and you live happily ever after. Maybe not what you're going for. The task is a failure. One of my favorites here is for doing things the hard way. Sometimes there's no other way. My favorite example of this is feature engineering. I have to give respect to the AutoML tools who take all the features and in a lot of clever ways combine them to get plausibly engineered features and test them for predictive power. But at the end of the day, there's too many possibilities. There's too many permutations, too many functions you can use to combine these things. There's no way you can automate all that. And they often require knowing things that aren't in the data set. You have to know what you're measuring. You have to know how it interacts with the other pieces. Often, physically what's behind it. Sometimes you have to know exactly the details of how it was measured. I had one situation where you actually had to know who made each measurement so that you would know how to properly interpret it and make a good feature out of it. There's no shortcut for that. Doing it the hard way is the only way sometimes. And then finally, this is the last one, serendipity. It is totally valid when you need to get from point A to point B to find the nearest on-ramp, blaze down the freeway, listen to some tunes, hop off the off-ramp, and you're there. You're done. You saw some concrete and, mission accomplished. But it's not the only way to do it. Sometimes you can take the long way. You can take the slow way, the hard way, and go by some back roads. When you do, you'll see some things. In The Hobbit, Thorin Oakenshield says, there's nothing like looking if you want to find something. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it's not always quite the something you were after. Now, he said this to Fili and Kili because they were getting rained on and danger of getting crushed to death by some giants. Fili and Kili went and found a dry cave, which was a win. Now, it happened to be a goblin-infested cave in the Misty Mountains, and they got kidnapped, but everything turned out okay in the end. They found something, but it wasn't quite the something they were after, and they were the better for it. My favorite example of this is when you get a new data set, so you have a CSV, pull up the data set or a manageable portion of it in a spreadsheet and just look at it. Just look at the columns. What are they labeled? Do they even make sense? Are there repeated names? Are there missing names? Are there entirely and utterly cryptic names? Look at the rows. Are there columns that have the same value for every row? Are there columns that are like 99% missing? Are there columns with states in the United States where some are capitalized and some are not? Actually ran across that pretty recently. Are there columns that tend to be missing together or tend to change in the same way together? Are there half a dozen different representations for missing values? Every single time I've done this, I've found things, seen things, found the answers to questions I didn't even think to ask. You'll find something. It won't always be quite the something you were after, but you'll find it and you'll be the better for it. And in my experience, this getting elbows deep in the code, in the data, this is the path from competency to expertise. I hope that you find your own zen of tedium and have a good time doing it. Thank you.